and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 327, and today's date is March 29th, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief for this Saturday. And in my past reports, I've been talking about Walmart, how their business model was based on the SNAP program. This is the food stamp program, and what we're finding out is that the everyday person is a lot poorer than everyone really thinks. And I have to thank Joe, who sent me this link to this article. And what I'm going to explain what this is. We know that Walmart depends on the SNAP program, but what they're seeing is that the overall shopper, even the people who are not on the SNAP program, are much poorer than everyone realizes, and they don't have that disposable income to pay for that extra merchandise. And this is why we're seeing a decline in retail at this point. And we have to remember there are an estimated 48 million Americans who are receiving food stamps right now, while roughly 80% of U.S. consumers shop at Walmart at some point during the year. And what they're seeing is that these people, even if they're not on the food stamp program, they have budgetary constraints and they can't afford to go out and buy the other merchandise. And this goes on to say that 10 years ago, roughly 50% of Walmart shoppers cited low prices as the most important reason to shop at Walmart. Today, that number is 75% because people are looking for cheaper items, lower prices, because they don't have that disposable income. They don't have the jobs. They don't have that full-time, high-paying job, because what we're seeing is many of the big corporations laying off right now, and it's hurting the entire middle class, and they are turning into the lower middle class, into the poor, and we are definitely seeing this. And right now, the struggle is universal for all retailers, and this is why we see these stores closing, and sales are down around 8 to 10% from the first of this year across all retailers. So everyone is having the same problem, and this is not going to get better because of all the announcements from the beginning of this year, with Dell, 15,000 people, Sony, 10,000, IBM, 13,000, and all the financial institutions laying off, 30, 20, 15,000. More and more people are headed to the same area, and there's just not enough jobs out there. Not these type of jobs. Yes, there might be some part-time jobs, but these are filling up. Stores are laying off. Stores are closing, and these jobs are also disappearing. And what Walmart didn't just reveal how poor its customers really are, it revealed just how poor so many U.S. shoppers are. And this is the entire point, is that every single American out there who is struggling, who couldn't get that job, who's still looking for that job, cannot make ends meet. We are not in a recovery. We are in a major decline, recession, going into a depression, which I personally think we're in a depression already, but I think the illusion has been out there where people don't even see it, and all these numbers have been manipulated and people don't know this. And again, they realize this, when I say they, I'm talking about the central bankers, U.S. government. They realize that this collapse is coming, and they need to get this war, this event started, because they don't want to be blamed on for this collapse. And before this collapse happens, they desperately need to remove all weapons from the American people. And what has happened right now is that President Obama was at a summit, a U.S.-EU summit held this week in Brussels, and President Obama and his European colleagues released a joint statement in reaffirming their common commitment to civilian disarmament as mandated in the United Nations Arms Trade Treaty. Paragraph 33 of the declaration released on March 26 states, "We reaffirm our joint commitments on a non-proliferation, disarmament, and arms control." Among other agreements, President Obama, in the name of the United States, joined with the gathered heads of state in promising, "We will also work together to promote the entry into force of the Arms Trade Treaty in 2014. Despite significant congressional opposition to United Nations' attempt to confiscate privately owned weapons and ammunition, President Obama quietly signed his name to a document that, if carried out, would amount to nothing less than the de facto repeal of the Second Amendment. And we have to remember this. They just can't go ahead and repeal an amendment. The United States has to have a majority vote from all the states with another amendment to remove an amendment. Just because they sign something does not remove an amendment. But this went on to say, and this is coming out of the New American, Article 2 of the treaty defined the scope of the treaty's prohibitions: the right to own, buy, sell, trade, or transfer all means of armed resistance, including handguns, is denied to civilians by this section of the Arms Treaty. Article 4 rounds out the regulation, also placing all parts and components of weapons within this scheme. Now, think about this for a second. They already knew they were doing this. Look at President Obama's executive orders. They match this exactly. They already knew they were going to push this agenda forward for a long time. I mean, just look. We have the UN Arms Treaty pending in the Senate right now. It was signed by John Kerry. It is pending on us in the Senate, and they are going to vote on this. But before they do, we know what the central bankers, the U.S. government, is going to do. They are going to create a false flag to help push this forward. And this is why we've been seeing all these mass shootings. This is why we've been seeing everything going on at this time. Now, 50 senators are standing together to protect the right to keep and bear arms as guaranteed by the Second Amendment, and have taken pen in hand to let the President know how they feel about this plan to rob their constituents of one of their most basic rights. And of course, they can't rob us of our rights. The rights belong to us. They just can't remove the Second Amendment because they, enacted another law. It doesn't work that way. The senators enumerated 6 reasons the President should refuse to present the Arms Trade Treaty to the Senate for ratification. Among the objections raised by the senatorial signatories is the ambiguity of the treaty, as well as the grant to foreign sources of authority the power to impose judgment or control on the U.S. Again, they're saying that the control and the ambiguity of this law doesn't really tell us what's going to happen, and we know what's going to happen. They're going to try to disarm every single person, and they're going to use the Arms Trade Treaty for this, and we know this for a fact. And it seems that the strong partnership between the European Union and the United States might be the wedge President Obama uses to separate Americans from their firearms and their freedom. And we can see they are definitely going ahead, and they're definitely going to push this agenda forward because they understand that the dollar is collapsing at this time, and they are desperately seeking to get this next event moved forward. And we can see it's the same oppositional group who is in Ukraine right now, where they want to disarm the people in Ukraine. The only reason they want to do this is because they don't want to lose their power. It's the same in the U.S. government. They want the people disarmed because they want the power. They do not want to lose it, and they're very nervous with Americans having weapons, because if you have a weapon, and there's a lot of Americans who have weapons, and they push into Washington, they could remove the government just like we've seen in every single other country. Now, right now, what the United States is trying to do, they are in talks with India and China, and what they're trying to do is convince them to isolate Russia at this time. And, of course, what they're doing is because of Ukraine right now. They're trying to have them impose sanctions not to deal in trade with Russia at this time, and it looks like they're not really making that much of a headway at this time, but they're going to continually push and push and push. And we understand that this event that's coming is being pushed in Syria at this time, and what we're seeing is that the CIA is feeding intelligence information to rebel terrorists in Syria. And what they're doing is American spy satellites have been listening in on communications from Syrian government forces and passing that intelligence to rebels through spies on the ground, according to various British media reports right now. And Syrian generals giving orders on the ground can be pinpointed within yards and identified by voice recognition techniques. The information has helped rebels to move and evacuate their agents from hospitals and other targets before the National Syrian Army arrived in those areas. And the paper suggests that CIA and MI6 controls the Syrian hacking operation through sophisticated satellites that Allied eavesdroppers can identify the commanders and troops on the calls. The Syrian hacking operation is a new part of the worldwide echelon system that was created to monitor the communist bloc during the Cold War. So we can see what's happening, and we also have to remember, currently right now, the U.S. Navy has 3 aircraft carrier battle groups in the Middle East within striking distance of Syria and Iran. This is completely being set up. We understand the military assets are already in Jordan. We understand that CENTCOM is the focal point where they're going to command the strike. We understand that President Obama is thinking about sending more advanced weapons like those man-powered missile launchers. I'm going to tell you right now, they're already there. They are getting ready to make their move and bring this event home. And this is what they've been trying to do this entire time. And what we're seeing right now is that there's a lot of cyber attacks happening, and the United States is cyber attacking China quite a bit. I mean, the United States government has a force right now, and they are hitting each one of those networks, and of course they're blaming it on China, which they're also hitting the United States. It's going back and forth, and right now China is saying that their hacking attacks have been soaring in 2013 and going into 2014, and again China has long singled out the United States as the top source of hacking into their systems, because we have to remember the yuan, the renminbi, are a threat to the dollar, and they realize that China is completely pushing and making their move, trying to become the next reserve currency of the world. And the Pentagon right now has plans to build and triple its cybersecurity personnel, because what do we understand? We understand the next event to hit the United States is going to be, coupled with physical attacks, a cyber attack, and we understand it's going to hit the financial institutions, we understand it's going to hit the power grid infrastructure, and we know this is going to happen, and this is going to be the next phase of World War III, and this is why they're going to triple their cyber force and bring this to a level where they can battle the other countries, which are going to be Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, Syria. All these countries cyber attack the United States. They're going to have to cyber attack back, because this is going to be the part of the next World War, and we can see this really ramping up at this time. Now, we understand that the yuan and renminbi are a direct threat to the dollar, but what is happening is that China has been pushing their yuan and renminbi across the globe. London, Frankfurt, Toronto, Vancouver, San Francisco, they're all battling to become Western centers for the Chinese currency trade. Germany, England, Canada, and U.S. are all vying to become Western centers for yuan trade. Now, it says the U.S., but not really so right now. They're on the fence. Germany's Bundesbank and the People's Bank of China agreed to cooperate in the clearing and settling of payments in the renminbi, paving the way for Frankfurt to corner a share of the offshore market. The Frankfurt Stock Exchange also signed an agreement with Bank of China, expanding their partnership. Germany companies, including Siemens, the country's biggest engineering company, and Volkswagen, are embracing the renminbi. The Bank of England has agreed to deal with the People's Bank of China to make London a hub for Chinese currency dealing. 2 Canadian cities are vying to become North America's primary center for trading the Chinese yuan, and the U.S. isn't ready to cede the North American yuan trade to Canada just yet. They're sitting here and they're sitting back and looking at everything, and what we're actually seeing is that the dollar is definitely losing its reserve status. It came out in Reuters, and it says the dollar reserve rolls secure but set to shrink. And that's their nice way of saying that the dollar is losing its reserve status. And this report goes on to say the dollar share of central bank reserves may fall by as much as 10 to 15 percentage points. Peter Zollner, head of the banking department at the central banks, also told one of the year's biggest gatherings of foreign exchange dealers that the role of China's renminbi would continue to grow. He expected trading and central bank reserves held in the yuan to continue to expand at a sustained pace. It could happen that the percentage will go slightly down with reserve currencies from between 65 and 70% of the dollar to between 50 and 60%. Shifts in currency allocations by central banks, many of whom declined to publish breakdowns of how much they hold in reserves in a particular currency, are closely watched by foreign exchange markets. Zollner said the expansion of yuan offshore trading was one factor behind that rise, and said he expected China's recent moves to prompt further change in how its currency regime, tightly controlled until now, operates. Most of the transactions over the last few years have been done in the offshore markets, but there is more and more activity in the domestic market in the renminbi. Quotas have been increased, and so on. We will see how this works out. It has to be observed for the next couple of months. Right now, what we are seeing is the dollar is losing the reserve status, the yuan and renminbi. China is making deals across the globe, expanding its reach, becoming the next reserve currency. The central bankers will not let this happen. They will fight tooth and nail before they allow China to be the reserve currency of the world. And what they are going to do is they are going to start this event because the economy and their fiat system is dying at this point. This is why they've been invading all of these countries, trying their best to prop up the dollar, and they're losing the battle. And as we know, before this happens, they need to disarm the American people, because when martial law is declared, when we get hit with this event, and when we go to war, they don't want the American people armed. They don't want the blame of the collapse on them, and this is what we are seeing take place. We can see this in every single stage and every report that I do. We are getting closer and closer to what is going to occur, and everybody needs to be prepared. We see the dollar collapsing. We see retail collapsing. We see real estate collapsing. And what do we see? We see the stock market hitting all-time new highs. We know for a fact this is fake. It is an illusion. We see Europe in a recession/depression. It is the time that they need to create this event, because they realize they cannot hold this illusion together much longer. It is moving too quickly, and they realize this, and this is why their backs are against the wall. They don't know what else to do except to start this event to cover up the entire collapse, so every single American looks at another country and says, yes, let's go to war. This is their end game, to cover this up. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.